Hey everyone, Dr. Spencer here again. Want to talk about the progression of the program, right? What are things going to look like? What is our philosophy and mantra with the strength training progression? I'm a big believer as a physical therapist and a coach that whoever I'm working with needs to understand why. I think there's value in that from a trust standpoint and understanding standpoint, so that we can get across and get to the goals that we're both trying to get to, right? You've got athletic goals that you want to do. I've got coaching goals that I'm trying to help you achieve. And if we're not on the same page and you don't understand and believe in the program that you're doing, then my thoughts are it's not going to work, right? It doesn't matter how well the program is designed with which scientific principles it's using. It doesn't matter. If the athlete and the individual does not believe in their rehab program, their athletic program, their running program, their strength program, then it's not going to work. So what I want to do today is I want to talk through some things about how this program is going to progress, right? So I'm going to use some scientific terms, try to give you examples and understanding of it. And then from there, we'll just kind of lead into the next piece. We've got this whole list here that I've got a disclaimer at the end that I think is the overarching king of what we need to be able to do within this program. So first is a progression within muscle activation, right? So a lot of times when we're learning to do a movement, we're going to start with just an isometric hold. So you've seen within like the calf muscle, for example, we start out with just some double leg heel raises where we're just lifting the heel and holding that position, right? We're trying to get that contraction to sustain and teach the body what that's supposed to feel like and how to neurologically activate that muscle so we can increase the amount of motor unit recruitment and increase the neural pathway drive to that muscle group, right? So a bunch of big sciencey terms. Don't necessarily worry about those. That's what I'm supposed to focus on. But I want you to know that we're going to start with a lot of these with that isometric, the slow, gradual, just muscle contraction. So it's like pushing against a wall. So if I'm having my hands and I'm pushing my two hands together here, the muscles are working, but the length isn't changing. And that's an isometric, right? So if you're lifting your heels and you're holding it for a prolonged period of time, the muscle's working, the muscle's contracting, but the muscle length is not changing, right? So pushing against the wall, if I'm holding on to I'm lifting on my bicep here and I'm pushing down, that's an isometric contraction, right? So that's what a lot of our movements start out as, right? The heel raise holds is an easy example. Next is a concentric movement. So a concentric movement is when the muscle is activated, the muscle is working, and it is shortening, right? So if I'm doing a bicep curl and I shorten up my bicep here, that is going from here to here, a concentric contraction. This is your heel raise, right? Just doing that up and down motion is a concentric contraction. Next, we go into eccentric contractions. So eccentric contractions generally are more challenging movements. Why? Because you're actually lifting something that you shouldn't be able to lift concentrically. So for an eccentric heel drop, common exercise, everybody Google searches Achilles pain, they're going to find this information. It's where you're standing off the edge of so I'm on a stair and I'm standing on the stair. I drop my heels below the stair. To truly make that an eccentric, you should be holding a heavy enough weight that when you get to the bottom, you can't push back up, right? So this is where the muscles are working, but the force, the external force that you're putting on it, whether that's that load that you're hanging on to, gravity, whatever, is more than the internal force that you can create, and you slowly lose that battle, right? So if I have my hand here and I'm contracting and I'm pushing and I'm slowly losing that battle, that's an eccentric force, an eccentric load. This is really, really important for tendon injuries, right? Tendons respond well to load and they respond well to eccentrics, which we'll talk about. So we've got isometrics, muscle length not changing, concentrics, muscle length is shortening, eccentrics, the muscle length is lengthening, and all those are under load. And then we have plyometrics, which is a jumping motion, right? It's energy storage and energy release. Plyometrics is running, right? That's where we need to get to for this. A lot of running injuries occur either in that plyometric or eccentric category, where eccentrically we're trying to slow the body down and prepare it for initial contact, prepare it for landing. Injuries occur there. Or plyometrics, it's that energy storage into a release when we land and then go into our next stride that can create an injury. So working through this progression is really, really important. The challenge is the isometrics and concentrics a lot of times are boring. People enjoy doing more of the eccentrics and plyos because they're fun. They're those like sexy motions and the movements that people are posting on social media and getting hits for. We need to be patient and work through that entire progression. Okay, so that's number one. We will work through that. Number two is bilateral versus unilateral. So we will start doing bilateral movements, two legs, right? We need to work 2 legs and then transition to working 1 leg. Why? Because running is a series of single leg hops. Running is a single leg movement. So the specificity of our strength training needs to transition to being single leg so that we can be as specific as possible for our running, right? So you're going to see a lot of double leg movements. A goblet squat will transition into a Bulgarian split squat or a rear foot elevated split squat, right? We do 2 legs into 1 leg, splitting the pelvis, transitioning more into a running specific motion. A lot of new movements we do, you'll see that. So when we get into a deadlift, we'll do a double leg deadlift, 2-legged, before we get to single legged. And then we kind of progress through that position. Okay. Increased velocity versus increased load. So these are 2 things that are going to increase as we go. We are in that early base phase. We're going to go to a building phase. We're going to go to a peak phase and a taper phase. As we progress and build through all of those phases, we'll start to get to increased velocity, and we're going to really start to turn up the amount of load we're using. Why? Because that is more specific to what you're doing from an athletic standpoint. As you get closer and closer to your race, to your event, you need to be able to increase the velocity and the load of the movements that you are doing, right? So to run fast, you've got to run fast. You've got to generate a lot of force and increase the velocity of how quickly you can turn that muscle group on and off. The velocity and the load of your strength training is going to help you do that as well. This will increase over time, and we'll talk more about the increased RPE and increased tempo as we go. Full lower body extremity focus. We will not just be loading the hip, right? We're going to try to load the outer hip, called the lateral hip. We're going to load the glutes. We're going to do hamstrings, quads, the front of the shin, the back of the shin, things within the foot, stability. We're going to try to work the entire lower extremity because one muscle group versus another is not going to be, you're not going to overutilize one versus another. You need to utilize the entire lower extremity, right? When you run, this is a full body motion. We need to do a lot of core and trunk stability training as well. That's why we have a lot of marches. We have a lot of core exercises with regards to planks and bridging, because maintaining a solid core and a solid foundation and upright posture, we know from a research standpoint, leads to greater performance. So we're going to try to focus on the entire lower extremity. This is not going to be hips only matter. I'm very invested in the calf complex, right? So I like loading the gastroc and the soleus. We'll learn more about that in the future. But we're not only going to load that region, we're going to load a little bit of everything. And eventually, in my opinion, everything needs to get to life movements, which are your push, your pull, your squat, your hinge, and your carry. We've got a squat, we've got a carry as we're going through this, some sort of marching variation and squat variations. We will introduce deadlifts as hinges or hip thrusts as hinges. We will introduce a pushing motion. We will introduce a pulling motion with regards to pressing and rowing and things like that. Those life movements transcend sport. They affect you across the scope of your lifespan, and that is impactful. That is important. That builds resiliency. That makes you a stronger individual in a holistic standpoint. So in my opinion, everything needs to get to these life movements. We need to be able to do those things, and we need to be able to jump. So this is kind of the progression that we're going to go through. Different muscle actions, 2 legs to 1, increase speed, increase weight, focus on the entire lower body, and get to life movements. The disclaimer is that you do not progress too quickly, right? You need to progress at a consistent rate, and you cannot make it up. I hear it all the time. I missed a session. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up. You don't make things up, right? So if you're going through a week and we're shooting for like this 15-minute mark to get some work in, and you're not able to get it done that day, something happened at work, you've got a busy schedule, you've got to go take the kids somewhere or do something, and you miss that day, you don't skip it and keep going through the program. You come back the next day and you do that day, right? Or the day after that and you do that day. You need to make sure that we follow the sequence of movements that are within the program, and we don't progress down to the next day. That's why we're only going to go one program, one piece at a time. And you always check that box before you get to the next piece, because all of this is a progression. If you skip one of these pieces, if you skip bilateral and you go straight to unilateral, your body is not tolerant, has not built up the resiliency from 2 legs to be able to tolerate 1 leg. So if we do this and we skip this and we go to the unilateral, we are setting ourselves up to increase our risk of an injury or something occurring. Right. So we got to be smart. We've got to know that we cannot progress too quickly. We go in order of sequencing of things that are programmed. If it feels too challenging, if you are extremely sore for greater than 24 hours, and you've tried to do things like a walk and a run and aerobic activity to help decrease that soreness, and it's not progressing, then we may need to repeat that movement. That's why you've seen some of these workouts you do multiple times in a row before going to the next one. And don't think that you can, quote unquote, make it up, right? You can't do, I'm going to get 2 of these in today to make up the one I missed yesterday. That's not beneficial. So trust the process. Go slowly through the program. Know this is a long-term play rather than trying to get a bunch of benefit in a short amount of time. And that's going to set you up to have the most amount of success, to be happy, healthy, and continue performing well.